Yo, what's up? This is Jay Dennis, and we're here with another ranked video. And for the first time, and certainly not the last time, we're going to be switching genres here. Typically, I do heavy metal, thrash metal, new metal, all the metal stuff, because that's what I am. I'm a metalhead. That's what I grew up as. But that doesn't mean that I don't have other tastes in music. I mean, shit. I'm even starting to warm up to country music a little bit. Mostly like the old stuff. But beyond the metal music, I do like hard rock. But even outside of the rock music, I love hip hop and rap. I like some 90s R&B. And having grown up in one of the best decades for this genre, I like some pop music. So moving forward, get ready to see me rank other artists' discographies from other genres, but predominantly doing metal music on here. So don't get too excited. I'm not going to be ranking Skrillex. God, do you guys even understand that reference? I'm not going to be ranking Skrillex or Toby Keith albums. I'm going to be mostly doing metal music. But today, we're doing one of the GOATs of rap, pretty much the rap god himself, an artist that I have been listening to since I was, 9 years old, maybe. Let's see, I was 8 back in 1999. My earliest memory of hearing Eminem, earliest one I can remember, was in the year 2000. Right before I moved back to Florida. I was leaving a birthday party. This was when Dragon Ball Z was big. And it was my birthday party. And I got all the Dragon Ball Z action figures, and I got some Dragon Ball Z trading cards. And when I was looking at the cards, I was hearing the real Slim Shady. Doon, 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 doon. I remember hearing that melody while looking. This is a vivid memory. I was looking at some card of Hercule kicking. I forgot who he was kicking, but I remember it was a Dragon Ball Z trading card of that. So with regard to memories, that's the earliest I can think back to when I listened to him. And from then, 5th grade, middle school, 8 Mile, all that stuff. From having not been able to listen to him, to listening to him behind my parents' backs, to listening to him to this day, and listening to pretty much every album he's put out in my entire life, and respecting the shit out of him, and using him as an influence and an inspiration for my own ability to be a wordsmith and rap and tell stories, write punchlines, all that good shit. So today, I'm going to be ranking and partially reviewing Eminem's 10 albums. I'm not doing Infinite because I really don't have any opinions on that one. I'm predominantly just doing 1999 up until his most recent album, Music to Be Murdered By, 2020. Not doing the 8 Mile soundtrack or his side artists like Good vs. Evil or D12 or any of that. It's just his 10 main studio albums. So I think I've rambled on long enough. I can tell you guys some more stories as we go through the albums, but a few of these were very, very closely contested, so I kind of had to use an X factor to do a tiebreaker on a few of these, but ultimately my mock ranking, meaning how I think it's going to come out, came out pretty similar to how it actually came out, and I'm pretty happy to see a nice mix of old and new making its way towards the top. So statistical ranking does not mean I think his worst album has no good songs on it, and it doesn't mean that I think his best album is flawless. It's really sad because to me his best album is near flawless, but it's weighed down by 2 tracks from being perfection, but I will get to that later. So without further ado, let's get started. At the number 10 spot, we have his 4th album, Encore, which I believe came out in 2004. So, oddly enough, this one's got a lot of sentimental value, and the main single off of it, Just Lose It, was kind of like my biggest start to being rebellious towards my parents. I was told that I couldn't listen to Eminem by one of my parents, and I was such a good little Boy Scout that I listened, and I said, fuck it. Anytime Just Lose It was on the radio, back when I was in 8th grade, I would listen to it, but like I would fall asleep listening to my boombox radio, because this was 2004, and I would be listening to that song anytime it came on. So, you know, I am part of the generation that still grew up with some tapes and CDs and like the radio. Like I'm a millennial, but like I did grow up during like some of the old analog days. So Just Lose It is still one of my favorite songs. And even though it's not one of his major singles throughout his legacy, for me personally, I like that song a lot. The other two good songs are Yellow Brick Road and Like Toy Soldiers. But ultimately, I gave this album like a 7 out of 10. And by the way, for all these albums, I'm not including the skits that he does. So if it's like a 20-track CD, I'm probably doing like 15 or 16 songs that I'm ranking, because the rest of them are skits, and those don't really count. Although they could add a little bit of value to each of the albums as like kind of like a storytelling device. But yeah, no, I gave this one a 7 out of 10, which means it's good, but the first tracks all the way up till Mosh, they're all good enough songs. But like the middle tracks like Puke, My First Single, Rain Man, Big Weenie, those are all terrible songs. Those are some of Eminem's worst songs, so that really drags this album down. And then he brings it back with Just Lose It, which is oddly the best song on the album to me. Couple of hidden gems are Spend Some Time, Yellow Brick Road, but of course the singles like Toy Soldiers, Mockingbird, Encore, like those are all really good songs. And I think Mosh is probably the worst single. But all in all, Encore is his weakest album, but doesn't mean there's not a couple of tracks on there worth listening to. But as a unit, I would never spin this CD front to back again. It's got some of his worst music on here. But, you know, it's part of his legacy. What are you going to do? All right, next up at the number 9 spot, his 5th album, which came out after Encore, after a hiatus, 2009's Relapse, which the score difference between Encore and Relapse is pretty significant, which means Encore was his worst album by quite a bit in terms of statistics. Relapse is the only Eminem album that I did not listen to right when it came out. It took me quite some time to actually listen to it, and then I never really replayed it that much. But upon re-listening to it again, all I have to say is, while there really are no standout songs that really grab me, there's not terrible tracks on here like there is on Encore. If anything, the worst track on this album, in my opinion, is probably the opening track, 3 a.m. It's the only song that I gave below a 7. Every other song got between a 7 and an 8. Exceptions being Deja Vu and Underground. I gave Deja Vu, which is the best track on the album, an 8.4, and I gave Underground, the closing track, an 8.1. Definitely two tracks that I slept on. And Stay Wide Awake's really good too. Don't really have anything to say about the singles on this album because they're really not memorable, but it's a consistent album. So like overall the album got a 7.6 out of 10, which means it's like middle good, heading in the great direction. But again, there's no songs that really grab me, except for Deja Vu and Underground. So don't have a whole lot to say about Relapse because I don't have a whole lot of knowledge about it, but I've listened to it a few times lately and back then. But in terms of potency and affecting me while it was relevant, definitely the least impactful Eminem album. But at the time, Eminem wasn't really what I was jamming too much, but that's that. So that's Relapse, which actually pretty much tied with the next one, but I gave the slight edge to the number 8 spot, his 2017 release, Revival. Now, I know this is a very polarizing album. Seems like most people either love it or hate it. My immediate interpretation of it when I heard it during like the holiday season of 2017. So I've got some good sentimental value for this album, but to me, this sounded like a little bit of like a Recovery Part 2 in terms of like all the pop artist features, all the different genres within here that Eminem was, spitting on top of. I gave this album a 7.6 also. It's just a hair better than Relapse. But what I will say was this album didn't rank as high as I thought it did because it didn't age as well as I thought it would. It's really sad because there's a song on there called Untouchable, which is a great social commentary on police brutality and everything. But like just the sheer fact that like let's say it's a 6-minute song. The first 2.5 minutes are great, but then the last 3.5 minutes take too goddamn long. So the song dragged on and it kind of didn't age that well. To me, the best tracks on this album are River. I gave that one a 9. I love that song. Tragic Endings and In Your Head, which samples the Cranberries' Zombie. So I love that song. That's a great sample. I don't mind that Eminem collaborates with pop artists or does a lot of sampling because his rapping on top of it's really good. But yeah, no, all in all, Revival is a little bit flat. Like, there's only a handful of songs here that are really great. I think I'm counting like 5. But I don't think it's terrible because he continues to showcase his ability to rap fast, which he kind of introduced in the Marshall Mathers LP Part 2. So the fact that he's rapping fast on this album, like on the song Offended, it kind of elevates this album up a little bit. But I'm kind of in the camp. I'm neither love it or hate it. I just like it. And it's anchored in good memories for me. And the song River, it's just a really good song. But yeah, no, I get it. I can see how some people wouldn't like this album. I think it's a little harsh to say that it's garbage or it's bad, but that's music, man. That's our interpretation. And if this wasn't your favorite album, then that's your right to think that. So that was number 8. At the number 7 spot, we have 2018's Kamikaze. For one reason only. It has one of Eminem's worst songs. And it's not even a full song. It's like a 2.5 minute song. It's called Nice Guy. This is the lowest rated Eminem song. I don't know what the fuck he was smoking. Probably nothing because he's sober now. But that song, Nice Guy, really dragged this album down because there's like 11 tracks on this album that are rateable. I don't remember if there's an intro or any skits or anything. But this album is very top heavy, where like pretty much every song up until Nice Guy is like great. But like the best tracks are The Ringer, Greatest in the World, I'm not greatest in the world, Lucky You's awesome, Not Alike is fucking awesome. My favorite track on this album is Fall. Eminem really comes out hard because this was a surprise album, and his intensity and his speed on this album is fucking beautiful. He really proves by effortlessly shitting on the mumble rap shtick that he really is the rap god. But if it wasn't for that track, Nice Guy, statistically this album definitely would have placed higher. It probably would have gotten towards the top. But I'm ranking albums here, not songs or feels. I'm ranking albums here, and as an album, one song out of an otherwise great album, it's a blemish, and if a blemish is big enough, it'll weigh it down. So, pretty much every track on this album is awesome. Good Guy and Venom are decent enough. Kamikaze and Normal are good enough, but all the other tracks are fantastic. Like I said, Not Alike, Fall, Ringer, Greatest, Lucky You, all awesome songs. So this one got a 7.8 out of 10 for me. If it didn't have that fucking track Nice Guy, it definitely would have surpassed an 8. Probably would have been way better. But anyway, Kamikaze is awesome, except for that one song. Next up at the number 6 spot, we have his debut album, if you don't count Infinite, the 1999 release Slim Shady LP. And before you shake your heads or panic that I'm choosing like a fucking iconic album to put this in the middle, we're getting to the really good shit now. So this stuff's really closely contested, and it all comes down to preference. when I re-listened to this album, I got a whole new respect for it. So again, we're talking about one of my favorite artists here. So if an album's not where you think it should be, leave a comment of why you like certain albums in a certain spot or why you agree or disagree with me. We're talking about one of my favorite rappers here, and again, I have some objective and some X factor reasons as to why. But songs like Role Model, My Fault, Still Don't Give a Fuck, those are my favorite tracks off of this album. The only song on here that's weak is Come On Everybody. Everything else is at least really good or great. But the reason why this album is kind of sitting in the middle at a 7.9 out of 10 is because there's only a small handful of, there's no tracks that are like, in my opinion, excellent or flawless. That gets more towards the top albums for me. But overall, it's a solid album, and it's an excellent debut from Slim Shady himself. So with regard to, My Name Is or any other singles on here, there's not a whole lot of nostalgia here for me. So that's kind of the beauty of these rankings. This album might be very nostalgic for you, and you probably rank it higher, but we've all got different upbringings and different experiences. So all in all, I think this one aged really well, and that's where it is on my list. Next up, at the number 5 spot, we have the 2013 release, Marshall Mathers LP Part 2, which I gave an 8.06 out of 10. I got this one when it came out. Once again, another hiatus of like 4 years. So him releasing this was a big deal, making a pretty solid comeback. Back in the day, back in 2013, I thought this album slapped, especially his debut of his like super fast rapping in Rap God. And then all the other tracks were pretty great too. Personal favorites. I try not to include singles when I talk about favorites, but sometimes that's just the case. This very consistent album, no weak tracks. All of them are at least pretty good. Weak meaning it's like below a 7. Like a 5 or a 6 either means like okay or mediocre. None of that on this album. Every song ranks above like a 7.5 kind of. But Rap God is excellent. I gave that one a 9 out of 10. Just the fucking wordplay and the level that he's spitting, you can't fuck with it. Monster, this is another single with Rihanna. I think that's a much better version of Love the Way You Lie. Obviously because that one has Rihanna too. But I just love the hook. I love the key. And I like the feature a little bit better. So I think Monster is one of the best singles. And then my favorite track on the album is called So Far. I gave that one a 9.2 out of 10. I love the sampling. I love the fucking reference to I'm Slim Shady because I'm the real Shady, like the real Slim Shady. I love the reference that he puts in there. Someone spit on my onion rings. I think my karma's catching up with me. Something kind of like that. Evil Twin is an excellent closer. But yeah, it opens on a great note with Bad Guy and Rhyme or Reason. But other than that, it's a pretty solid album. A little bit of sentimental value there, but ultimately this one's just got some excellent tracks on here that elevate it this high up. So that is the number 5 spot, Marshall Mathers LP Part 2. At number 4, we have his most recent album, Music to Be Murdered By, which came out this year. I included the intro track in this one because it's actually got some rapping in it. None of the skits, though. This one got just, again, marginally better than Marshall Mathers LP Part 2. Marshall Mathers LP Part 2, Music to Be Murdered By, and then the next one was pretty much a 3-way tie, but I had to rank it accordingly and give a slight edge to certain ones. Music to Be Murdered By is like a more fleshed out Kamikaze in a sense, because you still have the fast, aggressive, like just really flexing skill that he has. He's like at his best lyrically, wordplay, everything like that. Like, it's a different Eminem that we're dealing with now than back then. It seemed like back then it was more edgy and more about pissing people off. But there's still a little bit of that here, but just the wordplay and the punchlines and the speed, like it's just, you can't fuck with it. Unaccommodating is an excellent track. He once again teams up with Ed Sheeran, like in River, for Those Kind of Nights. That's a great track. Godzilla's awesome. What's that? Leaving Heaven? Love that song. And then I Will, pretty much one of the closing tracks, is pretty damn awesome. I think it's Unaccommodating. If it's got like that whole feature, I forgot his name, but the guy who's featured at the beginning for like the first 2 minutes, I fucking love the flow and I love the way he sounds. Like, just, it's such a beautifully constructed song, and the album just flows really well. Much like the previous album that I ranked, there really are no weak tracks on here. It's just pretty damn consistent through and through, with a couple of tracks that really elevate it. Like, again, Unaccommodating, best track on the album in my opinion. Godzilla and Those Kind of Nights, and then Leaving Heaven. Still kind of favoring this album out on some level, so don't have a whole lot of sentimental value or a whole lot to say, but this one definitely hit harder than Kamikaze did, even though Kamikaze fucking slaps. All right, can't believe I just said that. All right, next up at the number 3 spot, we have the turn of the century release, Marshall Mathers LP. So this one, same deal, like 8.05 out of 10, which means great. You just can't really fuck with certain tracks on this album and the consistency of this album. Kind of the same thing I've said about past albums, but this one, the fact that this album is so flush with great tracks is what elevates this one towards the top. If I can just point out the obvious singles, Stan is just a beautiful song. It's timeless. It still hits hard to this day. It's just beautiful writing. It's genius. The Real Slim Shady, of course, is an excellent single. Marshall Mathers, because I'm just Marshall Mathers. Love that song. Criminal, I'm back. That's why they call me Slim Shady. Kill You has kind of grown on me. The Way I Am. And Amityville, Bitch Please too. Kim's not one of my favorite songs, but I can definitely appreciate the anger and effort that went into it. So, all in all, Marshall Mathers LP doesn't have a whole lot of nostalgia value for me, the way other albums would for maybe other people. But based on where it's at in time and the fact that I do remember some of this, it basically was my introduction to Slim Shady, to Eminem. It's pretty easy for me to rank this one towards the very top. And again, between this number 3 spot and then the top 2, it gets a little close. The number 1 spot's pretty high up by a long shot, but Marshall Mathers LP, the original, excellent album. And even if I don't have a whole lot to say about it, it does have some good memories, and it has had some staying power in my life since I was a little boy. So that's the number 3 spot, 2000's original Marshall Mathers LP. All right, now we're back with the top 2. So at the number 2 spot for Eminem, we have his major comeback album. And I actually have to correct a statement I said earlier about there being a hiatus. This album came out between Relapse and Marshall Mathers LP 2. This 2010 release, Recovery. Yeah, definitely probably the most sentimental album for me from Eminem. Got it when it came out. Was all over that the summer of 2010. And, having re-listened to it a lot of the tracks aged pretty well, and some of them aged even better. The reason why this one's at the number 2 spot is because much like... which album was it? Much like Relapse, there's no bad or weak tracks on here. Or much like... I don't know. Recovery is a very solid and consistent album. Honestly, there aren't any tracks on here that I deemed excellent, but there are a lot of tracks here hovering between an 8, and the highest rated track I gave was Won't Back Down at 8.7. But a song that I didn't like back then that I actually like quite a bit now is White Trash Party. That song is fun. I do like it. Talking to Myself, Won't Back Down, Going Through Changes, Seduction. I fucking love Seduction. Going Through Changes samples the Ozzy Osbourne song Changes. I love that song. Spacebound used to be like my favorite song, but it kind of aged kind of decently, so it's not really my favorite anymore. But You're Never Over is another track that aged well. Like, I like it more now. But yeah, no, all in all, the reason why this one got towards the top is just simply because there were enough great tracks on here consistently and no bad songs that the weight was nice and even. So this one got an 8.12 out of 10, so it's just over great. So, yeah, again, a lot of sentimental value there. This definitely is not the Eminem album that I listen to the most, and the songs on here that I like the most, like I said, Won't Back Down, Seduction, Going Through Changes, they're not the ones I would listen to the most either, but just statistically, this one's number 2, and as an album, it's easy why this one would be at the number 2 spot. And, you know, for its place in time, it does hold a lot of weight, and as a comeback album, it's fantastic. It performed super well in the charts. It performed super well long-term with sales. This album is just very timeless. But for me personally, it doesn't have the same X factor as even some of the lower ranked ones. But just because I rank something a certain way doesn't mean I'm going to listen to it more or less. But we're just talking about kind of like statistics here. You know, I pretty much enjoy all the Eminem albums except for Encore and I guess Relapse. But I don't know. There's some artists where I don't go to them to listen to the full album. I go to them to listen to a handful of tracks at a time, or a single song. But either way, Eminem is still a storyteller, and these albums do have themes, and it is worth ranking. So with that being said, we only got one left. You guys know what it is. I knew this was going to be the top one. We have the number 1 spot, his third album, if you don't count Infinite. The 2002 release, The Eminem Show. So, quick story. I actually almost got this album when it came out. Like, I almost owned it. But again, I was a good little Boy Scout. I was at Best Buy with one of my parents, and I snuck off on my own. And again, I was like 11 years old. But I snuck off on my own, bought the CD, had it in the bag, and when they asked, "Oh, what'd you buy?" I was like, "I just got a CD." But then I felt guilty because I felt like I did something bad. So I took the CD out while I was on the drive home, and they said, "We need to go return that. You're not listening to this artist." So we returned it. I internalized that, and I was a good little sport for a year or two. I had one parent tell me I couldn't listen to like heavy metal music with like the screaming like Trivium, and I had another parent tell me I couldn't listen to Eminem. But my parents were separated. They'd been divorced for 10 years. Got the worst of both worlds with that. But I was like, you know what? One of them's not around at all times. So I can listen to heavy metal and shit when I'm with one, and I can listen to rap when I'm with the other. And then when neither's around, I can listen to either. Again, I kind of grew up a little bit of a Boy Scout and not much of a rebel until a little bit through high school. But ultimately, I did end up owning this album. This album did end up staying with me, and if it wasn't just for 2 fucking tracks, this album would probably be a near perfect 10 for me. But the Eminem Show got an 8.4 out of 10. And the bad tracks are songs I've never liked. Drips and My Dad's Gone Crazy. Those 2 songs are not good. And even though this song has the absolute most excellent tracks on here, this album has the most songs but above a 9. Unfortunately, and I don't know, maybe I just have to wait for it to hit me a certain way, because sometimes rankings and ratings of songs and artists and albums, sometimes they're fluid. Sometimes they hit you at the right moment and the potency makes you get goosebumps and it makes you see it in a new light. But I'm kind of shocked that I didn't give any Eminem song like a perfect 10. But perfect 10 is like, it's a very rare thing that I dish out. I don't give that. There's only like a tiny handful of songs, even from some artists that aren't my favorite, that probably get that. So, but the fact that the Eminem Show has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tracks that are ranked at a 9 or higher, not quite 10 though, it's pretty great. So what do you call it, I had quite a few nostalgic and sentimental eras in my life to this album that were good, and again, just re-listening to it, like, it's aged beautifully. It opens on such a fuck you note with White America. It's so freaking angry and like melodically beautiful at the same time. Like, White America gets a 9 out of 10. Business is catchy. I like it a lot. I gave that one an 8.5 out of 10. But like, listening to songs like Cleaning Out My Closet or Without Me, Sing for the Moment, the singles, it takes me back to 2002 when I was in 6th grade. And just dealing with that preteen angst and not quite hitting my stride yet, because I was still at that time an awkward kid who had a little bit of a hard time not making friends. I've always had at least a handful of friends growing up, but like in terms of just like being kind of like the annoying kid in class and that, you know, just kind of being socially awkward. Eventually I hit my stride and I've had a pretty smooth existence since then, but still good memories, still good times. Cleaning Out My Closet, White America, Soldier, underrated track, Say Goodbye to Hollywood. I love that track. Without Me, Sing for the Moment. Couple of other non-singles that are powerful are Superman, Haley's song. What I really like about this album is a lot of the guitar work going on in the background, whether it's acoustic or like, you know, slightly distorted soloing going on. But like, I love the guitar riff or chord progression of Superman. I love that they sample Aerosmith's Dream On for Sing for the Moment. Without Me is just fucking timeless and iconic. A lot of turn of the century references where if you're younger you might not get them, but for a time that I thoroughly enjoyed, the whole MTV era of the turn of the century with you know, like Carson Daly, Fred Durst, Hear the Margaret Who She Gave Head To First, Christina Aguilera, all that stuff. Like, I remember that from my childhood, and it just kind of makes me feel good. Till I Collapse is a great track, obviously. Soldier always gets me amped up. So the Eminem Show, it was just kind of a no-brainer that this would be my favorite Eminem album, and it was by 0.3, like not 0.3 but 0.3. Like, the Eminem Show got an 8.4, and then Recovery got a 8.1. So in terms of like weighing scores, and again, if it wasn't for fucking Drips and My Dad's Gone Crazy both getting like a 6 out of 10, just meaning like okay, and that's me giving like a sympathy score, like I'd rather just say mediocre or terrible, but it's Eminem, so there's still like tiny little bits of value in there that are just redeemable enough to call the songs okay. But yeah, Drips and My Dad's Gone Crazy weigh the album down quite a bit, but not enough to overshine they're just kind of small blemishes on an otherwise nearly impeccable face of a rap album. So guys, thank you for listening to me talk about Eminem for 36 minutes. This was, again, a little bit of a ranked and reviewed. Let me see, 36 minutes roughly for 10 albums, about, 3.6 minutes, if that makes sense, per album. It's not bad. Again, I'm covering a whole discography here. So that's my ranking. Thank you for listening. Again, Eminem is one of my favorite rap artists of all time, and I'm going to be doing other non-metal artists here in the future, and there's going to be a video or two coming out soon where it's not going to just be me, but I'm going to have a guest host on here do a ranking with me, somebody that I share an affinity with a particular artist for whichever one we're discussing. But keep an eye out for the next ranking videos. Probably going to be doing I'm not going to mention the ones with the guests just yet, but with regards to just me doing it, on the horizon we have Megadeth. That's going to be a big one because that's 15 albums. In Flames, Slayer, Stone Sour, Avenged Sevenfold, whatever else. I'm not really going to take requests because there's a high chance that whatever band you ask me to do, I probably might not be into that one as much. But hey, look, like I said, if you want to leave a comment and you really want to see a ranking and it happens to be a band that I have a strong interest in, then I'll do it and I'll give you a shout out. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check out the other ranking videos. I've done Slipknot, Sum 41, Trivium, Architects, Papa Roach, Korn, Amur, Deftones. And be sure to subscribe to the Jay Dennis podcast and subscribe to this damn channel. And I'll keep pumping out content as much as I can. Thank you guys. And say goodbye to Hollywood. All these bitches on my dick.